In Chapter 9, we cover observation versus experiment, subjects, factors, and treatments, how to experiment badly, randomized comparative experiments, the logic of randomized comparative experiments, cautions about experimentation, matched pairs, and other block designs. Recalling, explanatory variable versus response variable. In a study to relate two conditions, researchers often define one as the explanatory variable and the other as the outcome or response variable. Explanatory variable is one that may explain or may cause differences in a response variable or outcome variable. In a study to determine whether surgery or chemotherapy results in higher survival rates for a certain type of cancer, whether the patient survived is one variable, and whether he or she received surgery or chemotherapy is the other, which is the explanatory variable and which is the response variable. So the explanatory variable is whether they received surgery or chemotherapy, and the response variable is whether the patient survived. Observational study versus experiment, randomized experiment, create differences in the explanatory variable and examine results, response variable. Observational study, observe differences in the explanatory variable and notice whether these are related to differences in the response variable. 2 reasons why we must sometimes use an observational study instead of an experiment. If it is unethical or impossible to assign people to receive a specific treatment, for example, smoking. If certain explanatory variables are inherent traits and cannot be randomly assigned, for example, handedness. In contrast to observational studies, experiments don't just observe individuals or ask them questions. They actively impose some treatment in order to measure their response. Observational study versus experiment. An observational study observes individuals and measures variables of interest, but it does not attempt to influence the responses. The purpose of an observational study is to describe some group or situation. An experiment, on the other hand, deliberately imposes some treatment on individuals to observe their responses. The purpose of an experiment is to study whether the treatment causes a change in the response. When our goal is to understand cause and effect, experiments are the preferred source for fully convincing data. The distinction between observational studies and experiments is one of the most important in statistics. Confounding. A lurking or confounding variable is a variable that is not among the explanatory or response variables in a study, but that may influence the response variable. 2 variables, an explanatory variable and a lurking variable, are confounded when their effects on a response variable cannot be separated from each other. Confounding is a bigger problem in observational studies. Observational studies of the effect of one variable on another often fail because of confounding between the explanatory variable and one or more lurking variables. Well-designed experiments take steps to avoid confounding. Confounding example: observational study of the relationship between smoking during pregnancy and child's subsequent IQ a few years after birth. Explanatory variable: whether or not the mother smoked during pregnancy. Response variable: subsequent IQ of the child. Women who smoke may also have poor nutrition, lower levels of education, or lower income. Possible confounding variables: mother's nutrition, education, and income.